Good. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. What am I doing? Today, I am stitching in and making these little leather zip pullers. Okay. They go on the top and the front of this briefcase. So they go in here like so, and on the top, as you can see, the zip there. So the cutler briefcase is complete. Needs the little pullers making, and then they simply snap on. So I will be stitching in this little tiny piece here before your very eyes. Alrighty. So 3mm stitch spacing on this. Fil chinois 532, which is my favorite thickness when working with this stitch spacing. I think I went all the way through with the pricking iron on that one. I'm just going to open up that a little bit. Welcome, guys. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to ask away. So I've made one already, so I've got 2 more of these to make. And then they'll be attaching to the bag. Hope you guys are doing well on a Friday. Maybe you finished work early. Wish I could. I'm going to tighten that up a little bit more. Yeah, so that's with that stitch spacing, that's what that looks like there. Hopefully it will focus. So it just adds a nice little touch. I haven't gone for anything too raised. It contains a filler to thicken it out, to give it a little bit more substance. But very simple, very elegant, and that's what I'm going for with the entire bag. Nothing overly complex, just well executed with good craftsmanship, and that's what we're looking for. So not exactly minimalism, of course, but nothing too unnecessary. So fairly quick to stitch these, doesn't take too long. Luckily, only 3 of them to do. On a larger bag, there may be many, many more. So I'm going to turn this now. And the shape of these is actually matching the shape of the handles. So there's a little detail that I've added to it to make the design flow well. That's something that I strive to do in everything that I do, make sure the design has a flow to it. When it comes to color, shapes, symmetry, that kind of thing. Turning onto the other side now. So I'm going to do a bit of stitching, and then when I'm done with the stitching, we're going to do a little edge finishing together. If you want to stick around, do a little edge painting. So these edges just need a little fine sanding, and then a layer of edge paint for drying. Good morning from Tennessee, USA. Thank you for airing these. Hi, you're very welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for joining me. Good morning. And there's a good morning there from Polo. Good morning. It is currently 4 minutes to 5 in the PM here in the United Kingdom, in the Kent countryside. So it'll be a good afternoon, a good late afternoon for me. Coming up to the second puller stitched in. For those new who are just joining, I'll show you what I'm doing in just a second. Generally on leather goods like this, if it's very small, Mainly when you've got a seam very close to the edge. It's always a good idea to stitch, then edge finish, rather than the other way around, because sometimes you can edge finish and you notice that there's a bit of a wave on it, especially when you're sanding between layers. There's a bit of a wave, which comes from the fact that you're adding mass as you're stitching along. So sometimes it's best to stitch the piece and then sand everything flat and then begin edge finishing. So this is the one I've just done. So I'm going to tap those stitches down now. Doesn't really want to focus today. Actually, what I'm going to do first is just tuck those threads in a little bit. So working with linen, so we're not melting threads here. And then just a touch of glue inside. Brings a surprising amount of strength. If you've had to undo after doing this process, you'd be surprised. Okay, so moving that out of the way now, we can okay, so that's going to go in the edge finishing pile now. So that's a finished one. A little edge paint on there, so that's what it looks like. That's the rear side stitches, that's the front side stitches. So we're looking for some symmetry on this. All right, so how am I doing these? What am I doing here? Let me just move you over very slightly. So this is what it looks like on the inside. So you can see reinforcement tape. You always want to make sure that anything small like this gets reinforced. Even with good, strong leather, you know, when it's thin, can dry out over the decades. It has been known. So adding some reinforcement, especially something that's going to stay strong for a very long time, is going to make it just last a lot longer. So I'm putting in filler right now. So this is adding thickness and body and stiffness to the puller, because you don't want them to be too soft if you can avoid it. So I'm molding it over, adjusting as I matching up the edges, and then squeezing everything in. So that's what we got at the moment. So a little bit bare bones. Just tapping everything down just to make sure it stays in place. Good morning from Wisconsin. Got the Americans out in force today. Welcome, guys. All right, any edges that just need trimming up a fraction, just take a hair off this one. Sometimes you'll need to do that. Just making sure those edges are nice and straight. Always worth just taking the time for straight edges. It just makes life so much easier later on. If you have any edges that are out of alignment, it just makes life a lot harder than it needs to be when you're edge finishing. Okay, so let's see if this reaches all the way over. Don't know if it will. Almost. All right, so just using a little bit of heat just to iron down those surfaces first. Maybe a little stray glue there. I mean, good edge finishing is always down to the prep, always down to the prep. There's one thing about edges that I can teach you, is if you put the work in early, it makes life much easier and more satisfactory later on. So removing glue, then sanding, ideally one direction. Get everything nice and level. And then once that's done, you can just add a little bit of heat, iron those fibers down. And you'll end up with a nice, clean, flat foundation in which to work from. And that's really what you want to achieve. Making sure that there's no glue, all the fibers are ironed down, but it's still open to receiving edge paint, so edge paint can soak into it and anchor itself. So now that's done, I'll quickly heat up my edge creaser. And just taking a little bit of scrap. Double check that we're not too hot. Penny Wallace says, looks good. Thank you very much, Penny. So making a nice deep groove in there, which you can kind of see on that side. Makes it obviously aesthetically pleasing, but also gives me something to work with the pricking iron. Do I listen to music when working? Yeah, not when doing lives though. Great way to get yourself a copyright strike. Usually something like jazz, occasionally classical. Nothing that's too kind of, the kind of music that you really get into. I use it more of something to help me focus rather than being the focus. So anything easy listening to, chill out music, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm just going to double check. Excuse me a moment. So that is going to be the top side on that one. Okay. Yep. Can turn that off now. Don't want to waste gas. Just adding a little bit more heat. Sometimes the creasing process can disrupt with the guide that hangs over the edge. So getting everything nice and smooth, edges. And then I'll pick up on that again later. What I'm doing now, I need my pricking iron. Handy Path says, bonjour, just finished my today's leather work. It's nearly nighttime for me. Ah, cool. Whereabouts in the world are you then, if it's nearly nighttime for you? starting my stitches the same place as one of the other ones to keep it consistent. Over there. Same on that side. Now using a 2-prong down the front. Okay, so we're back in the clams now, round 2. There we go. I've already set up some thread, luckily. Thinking ahead. All right. All right, so starting the seam with 1 back stitch. Don't really need much more than that. Again, due to the nature of the item, I'm using a cast on this so that we have nice decorative angles indicative of hand stitching on both sides. So bring you over a little bit more. Any vintage tool acquisitions lately? You know what? I haven't bought tools for quite some time. Any vintage ones? No, nothing probably in the past year, I think. See if that will focus if I tap it. Yeah, no, as much as I do love old tools, most of them do need restoring, and it's a matter of having enough time to actually do the restoration process. Although you can never have enough tools, I think I've yet to come across a need for something that I don't have, and in that case, I don't tend to purchase. Doesn't mean I don't, keep my feelers out there for anything, but there's only 1 or 2 things I'm really looking for, which is a number 5 Dixon pricking iron in good condition, obverse. I have the reverse, and I've got the 4, and I've got the 6. I just don't have the 5. So that is what I'm looking for next. That will complete my Dixon set. You do have plenty of wall space, yeah. Well, a lot of them are in cabinets and my other workshop, which is mostly for other projects, template making, woodworking, jigs, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I tend to keep, maybe about 20% of what I have on the walls, along the sides and behind me, because that's the stuff that I use mostly. So for all those wondering, this is calf leather that I'm using on the outside. The inside for the filler is a piece of split. I think it's from a belt that I split from a thick piece of English bridle. So it just adds a little bit of stiffness to it. Otherwise they'll be a bit flimsy, a bit soft and prone to bending. So just by laminating several layers of leather, especially with a firmer leather on the inside, just helps to keep its shape, make it a bit more durable. One little back stitch and two little back stitches. So seal the deal with that, and then we can do a little edge finishing. Okay, let's move that over. All right, so where are we? There we are. So just tucking those in. And just a dab of glue in there. Then we can tap them down. That just closes the leather around them. Just gives a tighter stitch. Keeps everything below the surface. And there we are. All right, so we've got two to finish now. So I'm just going to iron down the fibers again. Get that edge nice and flat. But still porous. And if you want thinner edges, yet maintain the same density, one thing you can do is just put the whole thing in some edging pliers. Give it a good crush. You can even essentially hammer down the stitches instead of using an actual hammer, but just squeeze them down. Just brings those edges in a little bit more. And then while they're still crushed, I'm going to add a little bit of edge paint. Now these are tiny, so you only need to use a little roundel, and that should be enough. Cheers from Brampton, Ontario, Canada. I used to live in Hamilton for a few years, Dundas area. It's actually where I started Leathercraft. You ever been to Tundra Leather in Hamilton? I've been following your work since you started your Leathercraft Masterclass Academy. Ah, thank you. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy. So just add in the first layer. Making sure we've got nice, neat edges. Love the apron and edge finishing classes. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I remember the apron course. Ran a competition with that as well. All right, so that's the first layer of that one. So I'm going to leave that to the side. So I'm going to put it on a little glue pot there. Make sure that we haven't got any stray edge paint where we don't want it to be. Is there any optimal temperature for heat finishing the edges? No, it's just when you start, the minimum that will get the job done essentially is what you're looking for. And you know, a lot of people think that the best way to finish edges is to get all the edge paint on there and then worry about the finishing using heat later on. And the opposite is true. It's more about finishing as much as you can by having a level layer to put, you know, as a foundation to put your edge paint on there, but making sure that you're sanding everything right the way back. If there's any little dips or any shiny areas as you're sanding that's still there, you still need to carry on working. So you need to put the work in early so that literally if you're using heat, all you have to do towards the end is just use the minimum necessary heat just to go over the edge. And that's literally it, just to finish it off, rather than trying to, you know, melt it and everything like that, which is what you really want to avoid. So is there a temperature? You know, it's going to vary by brand. The temperature regulation is going to vary by, you know, what unit you're using, what machine you're using, that kind of thing. So, you know, I could say 100 degrees, but it might be 110 and 120, it might be 90. You know, the best thing to do whenever you're using an edge paint is start low, you know, sand it right back and then see if you can smooth it. If not, add a little bit more, add a little bit more, add a little bit more until you get the desired effect. If it's bumpy, I should sand it first. 100%. 100%. You know, start out with, he says, he says with a lumpy edge there. Start out with, you know, the smoothest edge you can get on bare leather. You know, not burnishing, because if you burnish, you're closing the fibers up so it won't accept and absorb the paint. But you need to have the smoothest edge possible. And then you put the first layer down, and then again you get the smoothest edge possible with one layer of paint. Need another layer? Probably do. Smoothest edge possible after putting the second one on. You know, that's, get the work done early so that literally all you have to do is to smooth it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that looks good. Done. And then you've got a really nice edge. You know, put the work in early and then finish with a little bit of heat or whatever your preferred method of finishing is. Otherwise, if you're, maybe not the best word for it, if you're lazy in the beginning, you're working 5 times as hard towards the end and having to use multiple, you know, 5, 6, 7 layers of edge paint and all that kind of thing, because you're playing catch up all the time for the work not done early. So guys, any questions? Because once I've finished this first layer, obviously I have to let them dry. And I won't make you watch paint dry. I'll have to do a little dance and then, you know, to keep you entertained. Almost there. So these can be fiddly, but they're actually quite fun because they're not overly complex. I guess you can make anything overly complex, but zip pullers, I think, is such a great little detail that when you have really nice designed, neatly done pullers on a bag, it really does set that bag apart, because no one puts in that kind of detail into something so small and then didn't go the extra mile with the rest of the bag. So it really says something about the craftsmanship when you have a nice little zip puller. And here's a finished one that you can look at. So that's going to be opening up the front of the bag. So thank you for joining me, guys. I really appreciate you having a chat with me. I used edge paint and thought it was so ugly, I kept adding more layers of paint instead of sanding it. Yeah, it's all part of it, but it's, you know, you just need to have a few of these little aha moments where you sand it back and put the next one on and it dries and it's almost perfect. And, you know, then you use a really fine grit sandpaper, 1200, 2000 grit even, to get it really smooth, and then just top it off with a little bit of heat and it just gets those edges shining. It's really good. But the more time and effort you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. It's not to say that edge paint is the best edge finishing process. Some designs and some pieces really call for burnishing, some are turned edge or edge binding. But sometimes edge paint is the right tool, the right substance for the job. I thought I was making zipper tugs for coffee. Friends always have long triangular scraps and a bit of trimming and care. Cool. I've had some clients come and ask me, how much do I charge for making a bag using the leather they bring? Have you ever had a situation like that? What should I say? No, because yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I've been asked, I've said, oh, can you do this in crocodile or goat skin or calf leather and things like that? And some people are quite knowledgeable, but unless it was like a vintage piece, oh, this was my grandfather's bag, I'd like to have you know, it's beyond restoration, but I'd like to have a wallet made out of it. I've had stuff like that before, but bringing you leather, I mean, you can say, bring it round and I'll have a look at it, but it could be like upholstery leather or something rubbish. And it sounds like they might be trying to save money, in which case, probably not the best client for you. I don't know, that's, you have to ask yourself. The fiddlier the better for me, keeps the interest and concentration. Yeah, definitely gets you in the zone. Cheers, Philip. Thank you, cheers. Notice these guys are using irons a lot. What's the major difference between irons and groovers? Pricking irons, or are you talking about pricking irons? Tell you what, Ryan, shoot me an email and you can ask me on there and we can double check what you're mentioning. It was vintage leather, lizard. Oh, right, okay. As long as it's not beyond, you know, if it's really dried out, but you're only going to see that if you kind of inspect it, then you can use something like Reptan by Sophia to help restore it. Usually, you know, something like that would require what's the substance? Lanolin is a good one for that, which is oil or wax from sheep's wool. It's good for reptilian skins, things like that, but it's in Reptan by Sophia. So it could be, that might be an interesting project actually. If, you know, I was a bit dubious there. Are they trying to give you some crappy leather to cheapen the price or something? Vintage lizard, I'd probably go with that. Thanks, Phil says, Adam, which pricking iron did you use? Tooth size, 3mm. Ryan Smith says, heat. I notice you guys are using irons a lot. What's the major differences between irons and groovers? Heating iron, as in electric edge creaser, is that what you mean? Like a fileteuse? What's the difference between that and grooving? I suppose you're asking what's the difference between an edge crease and a groove. A groove is material removed to create a hollow in which to put stitches in, usually. Edge creasing is decorative mainly, and you're not removing material, you're actually compressing material along the edge, which also neatens the edge, frames the stitch, and gives you something to stitch against as well. Do you put your logo on those? On these tiny little... I don't think my logo would fit on that, to be honest. Hello from New Orleans. Hello from the United Kingdom. Anyway, thanks a lot for joining me, guys. Don't forget to go and get your free tool buyer's guide and leather selection video at leathercraftmasterclass.com. Link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video or you learned at least one thing from what I was saying, or just, you know, an idea popped into your head, don't forget to hit that like button. That really, really helps, and that's something you can do for me. So until the next time, thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Take it easy, guys.